We got a diaper to change. Oh, there you go. Say hi. Hello everyone. Welcome back to our channel, Worth the Wait. My name is Sharetta. Thank you for coming back to our channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing my birth story of our son, Steven. If you're new to our channel, if you go a couple videos back, we shared on our pregnancy journey and becoming parents. So this video is a little overdue, but that's all right. I have filmed this probably like 3-4 times now because there's just so much to share. My total labor was 40 hours long, so there's so much to share, and I just want to make sure that I really tell the story as much as possible. So when I was pregnant, one of the things that I did a lot was constantly watch birth stories or read birth story blogs online. I am a first-time mom. This is our first child. I had no idea what to expect or what I was going to be in for, and so I was constantly looking up other people's story, like what happened, how long were you in labor, you know, did you do it natural, did you take drugs? I would just constantly look up stories. And so I believe my story is one of those that I would like to put out there for someone else who is pregnant or preparing to give birth, or if you just want to hear, you like hearing birth stories. I just think my story should be out there to encourage someone and just provide, you know, a perspective on what happened in our world. So before I get into what happened with the beginning of the birth story, I do want to share a little bit of background. If you watched our last video, I shared that when I was 23 weeks pregnant, I was diagnosed with pericarditis, which is basically there's fluid around my heart. So if you haven't watched that video, definitely check it out. We'll link it somewhere here on the screen below. That experience influenced, you know, my birth plan or decisions that I was going to make. When it came to the actual birth, I didn't write out a specific plan. I didn't, you know, have like a outline of exactly what I wanted, because I know that with babies coming and being born into the world, anything can happen. But I did have preferences. I had, you know, certain preferences that I wanted to see and come to fruition. One of the first preferences is that I wanted to give birth at a birthing center. And if you're not familiar with what a birthing center is, it is a place where it's basically like a medium between a home birth and a hospital birth. So you're in the center, but they do, you know, as much, you're free to do as you need to deliver the baby without as much restrictions that there are in hospitals. And at the same time, they may not have access to as much equipment or you know, emergency or just things to handle emergencies when it comes to delivering babies. They may not have all of those things, and so they're backed by a hospital, but this is like giving you the medium between a hospital world and a home world. And so I wasn't comfortable giving birth at home per se, but I know I didn't want to give birth in a hospital either, just from personal experiences at hospitals. And so I went with a birthing center. However, after I was diagnosed and recovering, maternal fetal medicine recommended that I give birth in a hospital because labor can put stress on your heart, and they just wanted me to be in an environment where if there was something, an emergency, or I needed something while giving birth, that they would have it available there for me. So this was a very difficult thing to handle. I was 20 to 28 weeks pregnant at this point. After recovering in my 3rd trimester, now I had to find completely new care. They did give me the option to just deliver at the hospital that was backed by the birth center I was going to give birth at, but we wanted to just do, if we were going to give birth at our hospital now, we wanted to do our research and, you know, just find what's the best hospital that we would actually want to select. And God is good because he allowed us to find a provider who was a midwife that delivered at a hospital. So she was connected to a hospital, she did her births in a hospital, but we were under her midwifery care. So that allowed me to still have, you know, the midwife experience, which I was going to get from the birth center, but it would be at a hospital to oblige with, you know, the recommendation from the doctors. And so we found this care at 28 weeks pregnant. God made a way. She was able to take me in, even though this was very late, into the pregnancy. And most providers don't usually take on clients, at least here in Pennsylvania, they don't really take on clients that late in their pregnancy, because at this point you're going to start having more visits and that sort of thing. And also building a relationship, right, with the person that is going to be delivering your child. This is a very late, a late time to start that. But God is good. He still worked it out for us to get what we initially desired in some form. Along with this desire to, have a unrestricted birth, so to speak, my main desire was for the birth process to be as natural as possible. God has designed for women, our bodies, to give birth, and there are so many things that just happen without us needing to do anything to help the child come into the world. And that's what I wanted, right? There's nothing wrong with desiring God's ideal. And so that's what I wanted. I wanted my body to go into labor naturally, and I wanted our child to be born naturally, and I didn't want to have drugs to induce me or anything like that, and I didn't want to have surgery. I just wanted it to be as natural as possible. I know the benefits of it being as natural as possible, and that's what I desired. So that was my preference. I didn't have a plan of how I was going to get there, but that was my preference for the birth. Being that I was now going to give birth at a hospital and I still wanted to have this natural birth, I did do some research, and I picked up this book called Natural Hospital Birth by Cynthia Gabriel, and I started to read it to prepare for giving birth in a hospital. I really wanted to be as informed as possible because this was going to be different. I had went through trainings on the birthing center, so I was prepared for that, but now I needed to prepare for a hospital. So I started reading this book, which was very insightful for me, and it actually played a crucial role in the birth story, which I'm going to get to. Along with that, we also made a decision to hire a doula. I had been doing some reading on, the mortality rate for African American women when it comes to giving birth, and the statistics are quite alarming, and so we decided we wanted to have somebody additional with us so that I would be fully supported as a patient through the birth process. So those were two other things that I did in preparation for the birth. So now, on June 5th at about 12:30 in the morning, I got up from my usual, late pregnancy bathroom runs. At this point, I was probably going to the bathroom every hour, even in the middle of the night. And so I got up to use the bathroom, and for me, I would keep all the lights off because when I got up to use the bathroom, I wanted to be able to fall back asleep without any problems. I wake up when there's a lot of light, so I would keep the lights off. So I went to use the bathroom, and after, initially using it, I realized I'm still sitting there and fluid is still trickling, but it's not willing. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, wait, why am I still, feeling fluid? And it took a second. Of course, I'm a little sleepy, and I realized, wait, is this my water breaking? So I flip on the light and I check, and I'm like, oh my goodness, my water just broke. I was so surprised because, number one, I did not expect to go into labor before 40 weeks. My husband and I thought that we were going to probably even go past my due date. So I didn't think I was going to go into labor early. And number two, I definitely did not think my water was going to break first to start my labor. The statistic in the book from a study says that only 1 in 12 births start with water breaking first. That's like about 12%. So it's a very small group of women whose water breaks first to start their labor. And I don't know, I just didn't expect that would be me. But to my surprise, my water broke. So I woke Brandon up. I said, my water just broke. He was just like, what? Because, like I said, we weren't expecting me to go into labor early, and I was 39 weeks pregnant on that actual day.
What's going on, y'all? So it seems like the labor process has begun, where it's like 1, almost 2 o'clock in the morning. I guess, the official day for week 39. And Sharetta woke up around, I would say, an hour ago and had to use the restroom. And then it was like some little trinkle trinkle. And we knew, or we presumed, I guess, at that point that, hey, something's different about this. And just so happened to come along with the trinkle trinkle was these frequent contractions now. So, yeah, this is the real deal. This is the real deal. Wow, really in the middle of the night too. It's crazy. I was like half asleep when she first woke me up, and I was like, what? But it's a good thing that the bags are ready, and yeah, for the most part, everything is pretty much set. So we're just gonna go through this, and yeah, I gotta go.
And so my water breaks, and I'm like, okay, well, here we go. The instructions given by my midwife was, if something happened in the middle of the night and it was not an emergency, to wait until about 6 a.m. to give them a call. If it was an emergency, obviously there was protocol for that. So this wasn't an emergency. My water just broke. So we didn't call. I just said, let me go back to sleep and wait for contractions and, you know, the whole entire process to start. Contractions started immediately, which is a good thing. And I tried to sleep through them, but it just became very difficult. About 4:30 a.m., I decided to just stay up because I was getting very uncomfortable. They weren't intense, but it was definitely not dull enough for me to just ignore it and go to sleep. And so 4 a.m. or between 4 to 5 a.m. we get up and we're starting to just breathe through the contractions and start timing them to see how far apart they are. Around 6 a.m. or so, we call my midwife to let her know that labor has started. And, of course, she asked, am I water break? So we say yes. And then she kind of just goes through a list of questions just to make sure that, I'm doing well, baby's doing well. And one of the questions she asked me, which is important for me to mention, was whether or not I saw meconium, which is basically an indicator that the baby has pooped in the fluid. And it can be a problem with giving birth because if it's inhaled, it can cause lung issues and that sort of thing. I can't remember all the scientific information, but it's a protocol question that's asked when your water breaks before contractions start and you give birth. And, my response based on what I saw was no. I didn't see any colors that would indicate that. So she said, okay. And then we went over the 411 rule one more time, which is basically, they, in wanting to stay home as long as possible and labor at home before going to the hospital, she wanted to see my contractions be 4 minutes apart, 1 minute long each, and for 1 hour long. So for a whole hour, I need to have contractions that are a minute long, 4 minutes apart. And so we said, okay, and we started tracking my contractions. And at this point, they were just like every 6 minutes, every 8 minutes, 10 minutes, 6 minutes. Average was 6 minutes, but it was jumping around. It wasn't consistent. So we're tracking, and, by 8:30 a.m., I'm kind of feeling like, more pain than I was at 4:30 a.m. So contractions are really getting more intense. And we're tracking, we're going along, and I'm trying to bounce on the exercise burning ball and just try different things at home to help cope with the pain, not really keep my mind on it, but just help my body progress. 12 o'clock comes. My midwife had checked in at some point, I can't remember what time, but I still wasn't getting consistent to 4 minutes. And I think I can't remember if it was before or after, but at some point we decided for me to take a bath, right? So to soak in some warm water, kind of ease my body from the contractions, and then take a walk outside and get myself moving to help things move along, because clearly, I just wasn't getting consistent, so I wasn't really transitioning in labor.
What's going on, y'all? It's Brandon back here. Just letting you guys know how things are going with the birth. It's progressing along. So as you saw before, there was some late night work that we were putting in because the contractions just woke up Sharetta out of her sleep, and then the water broke, and then we were just like, oh snap, this is real. And so we're about almost 12 hours from the point when her water broke, or when the contractions first started. So we're just here at home, laboring at home, taking our time. The midwife and the doula encouraged us just to labor at home as long as possible, as long as Sharetta is okay, and she doesn't feel like anything is going on that shouldn't be going on. As long as she's all right, then we can labor at home until the contractions get a little bit more intense and closer together. So that's where things are right now, and we're just gonna pray and ride this thing out, continue talking to each other, and spending time together and just appreciating this birth experience. So I'll make sure that I update as much as I can. Sharetta is taking a nice bath right now to help alleviate the pain of the contractions, and we're gonna take a walk soon, I think. So yeah, all right, later.
My midwife checks in. We tell her I'm still inconsistent, and she's kind of like, all right, I think I want you guys to get ready to come in, and we're gonna put you on Pitocin. So Pitocin is basically synthetic oxytocin, I think. So naturally our bodies produce that hormone that helps our uterus contract, etc., etc. Pitocin is a synthetic version of that you'll be hooked up to help your body dilate and help your contractions regulate a little bit more. So the idea is they want it to help. It's not guaranteed to help, but they want it to help your body do that. And the crazy thing is, I remember in one of our last appointments before going into labor, I asked, what would be the protocol if my water breaks first? And the response I got did not give me an indication that, the first alternative would be going on drugs. It was just like, we just want to monitor. We don't want your membranes to be ruptured for too long, but we do want to monitor to make sure that the baby's okay. So when she mentioned just coming to the hospital to get on Pitocin because it had been maybe 12 hours and my contractions hadn't gotten consistent, I was a little surprised by that, and that kind of made me and Brandon realize, like, okay, we want this natural birth. We don't want drugs, but we're only 12 hours into it, and it's like, and I'm saying only 12 hours, this is short amount of time. But we're 12 hours into it, and it's not intense, so I'm a little surprised that we're already talking about drug alternatives. So that happened. We take this walk outside. I'm feeling a little bit more pressure now. I had to stop during the contractions, stop walking to breathe because it's starting to pick up. In addition to this, my water continued to break 2 more times, I would say. I was drinking a lot of fluid to continue to keep myself and the baby hydrated, but my water did break 2 more times. And so throughout all of this, I'm texting our doula, or Brandon's texting our doula for me, and we didn't want her to come over until we really felt like we needed the help. So she was just trying to give us suggestions. She did mention that maybe the baby's in a weird position, and that's why my contractions aren't getting consistent. And so she sent a picture of some positions to try, and I can't really remember whether or not I tried all of them. I think I did probably try to move around, but I remembered that things were just getting a little bit more difficult to handle in terms of the pain. Around 4:30, we made the decision for her to come over and kind of aid us. And yes, my midwife checked in again. We told her we just wanted to wait and see a little bit longer before we came in, and so we tried to stall that whole plan of Pitocin for as long as we could. So the midwife comes over. She's helping, you know, massage my back and help me breathe through the contractions, and it's helping, but contractions still aren't getting consistent. I mean, they would go from 6 minutes, sometimes 4 minutes, sometimes 2 minutes, but it just never stayed in a rhythm for that hour time period we were looking for. So around, at this point, I want to say where it's like 5-6 p.m. that the doula came over, and then by 8 o'clock, I'm just like, ugh. I'm feeling a lot of pressure now, like something's pushing down inside of me. I'm feeling more pain, and I'm thinking to myself, like, maybe the time isn't changing, but I'm still transitioning. Like, this has to be active labor because I'm feeling way more pain than I was in the beginning. And so I was like, you know what, let's go to the hospital. I think that, like, the baby is definitely moving down because I feel a whole lot more pressure than I did before. So we grab everything and we're packing up the car and we drive to the hospital, and at this point I just remember starting to count down from 30 seconds for each contraction just to help me get through it, because contractions kind of go like, they start, they go, they peak, and then it comes back down. And so to help me get over that peak, I started counting down from 30 seconds. We get to the hospital about like 8:30, 9 o'clock p.m. and, you know, go through triage, and my midwife comes in to do my care, and she checks me, and we discover two things. First thing is that I'm only 3 centimeters dilated, so I'm not in active labor. The second thing was that she checked the color of my fluid, and she's like, the baby definitely pooped. And she kind of looked a little upset because obviously she asked me and I said no, because I really thought no based on what I saw, but she's upset because, you know, this is a risk, and she already wanted me to come to the hospital like 8-9 hours ago, and I didn't. And so it kind of shifted the way things were starting to go with my labor. Obviously I'm in the hospital now, I can't leave, especially because meconium is present. They're not gonna let me leave. And so, you know, they decided to get a room ready for me, and she's just kind of like, what do you want to do? Like, you need to get on the Pitocin. It's not as bad as you think. You know, let's just get this moving in a better direction. And, you know, Brandon and I are still like, I had watched The Business of Being Born, which is a documentary about giving birth, and in there they talk about like the cycle of interventions where you get maybe Pitocin, or you get one intervention in your birth process, and then that leads to another intervention because it may not work, to another intervention, to another intervention, and before you know, you find yourself on this cycle. Your body's not doing what, you know, it naturally should do, and then you need to probably end up with a surgery. So this is one of the reasons why we're so hesitant to just jump to Pitocin, because I'm like, have we really exhausted all of my options to help, you know, my contractions get into a rhythm before just jumping to Pitocin? So we asked her for more time. We said, hey, we just want a little bit more time. And, you know, she was very respectful of that. And so they checked me into a room. We get in the room, we ask for a ball, and, you know, same thing. I'm trying to move around, I'm trying to breathe. We're probably at like 10-11 p.m. at this point. She's checking in on me. I can't remember how periodically my midwife was coming in to check on me, but, you know, we're just trying to like let it play itself out. Let it play itself out. Pray and stay encouraged that, you know, we may not need to go the drug path. We can just, you know, figure something out that's gonna work to help get my contractions consistent. I want to say about, it was definitely after midnight at this point. She checks me again. I don't know if she fully checked me, but because the way she did it was just like, you're still like 4 centimeters. Like it wasn't like a, I think you're, you know, this much. It was just like, you're just not where you need to be, and this is a problem. That's the kind of the way it was. So I still wasn't in active labor according to her check. And so she's just like, we need to figure something out, because we can't just have you in a room if a baby's not coming. And, you know, what do you all want to do? I've already given my recommendation several times to start Pitocin, but what do you want to do? So we asked for some space and time to pray, and then Brandon looks at me and he's like, you know, we haven't tried red raspberry leaf tea. And if you're not familiar with red raspberry leaf, it's a herb that is very, very good, especially for women and giving birth. Basically your uterine health. I think that's the proper word. It's very, very good for that. You know, if you are having your menstrual time of the month and having cramps, red raspberry leaf tea works amazing for that. Just drink a cup of that and it really helps. I was drinking it leading up to birth, but during birth during this whole process I had not drank any. I was drinking like coconut water and regular water. So he's like, you know, we haven't tried it. Maybe your uterus is tired and, you know, it needs like some help, some gas in the tank. So he's like, I could probably go down the street to Wawa, which is like a big deal here in Pennsylvania. I can go down the street to Wawa and get some tea, and while I do that, maybe you go in the shower and try some water again. So we say okay, and we tell our midwife that's what we want to kind of do next. And so Brandon goes to get the tea. My doula helps me get into the shower, and that was like the best shower of my life, because I just remembered the water being so soothing to help bring down the pain. I think I almost fell asleep. They had to come check to make sure I was still, you know, okay, because probably like 30 minutes had passed or something. And at this point we're at like 2 a.m. and I get out the shower and I get back in the bed, and you know, contractions are still happening, but it wasn't as painful. And then I just felt this huge contraction just come and hit me, and I was just like, I'm done. I can't handle this anymore. Like, I'm just, at this point, I've been in labor for over 24 hours, and although I'm holding on to a glimmer of hope and faith that something will just change in the rhythm of my contractions, I just wasn't seeing it. I just wasn't seeing that change that I was looking for to give me hope that everything's going okay. And I look at Brandon and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And he was in agreement with me, because obviously he can see what I'm going through. Like, I literally, you know, if my midwife came to check in or somebody came to ask questions or something like that, and I was in the middle of a contraction, I literally had to stop everything and just count. And he could see the pain that I was going through at this point. And so I tell him, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Like, as much as I don't want drugs, I don't know if I can handle, like, this baby just needs to get out. At this point, that's just where I was. And so we say, okay, what decision are we going to make? And what we were told, you know, by our midwife, is to get on Pitocin to help me dilate, etc., etc. But I was like, if I go on Pitocin, that's going to mean that more contractions are going to come more quickly, more painfully, because, you know, that's naturally what happens in labor. And then I'm going to have to push. And I was just like, no, I think we should just get a C-section. That's literally where we were at this point of just over 24 hours of praying and trying so many, you know, methods that we could think of to help my labor progress, or not progress. Oh yeah, progress. My contractions were happening; they just weren't getting consistent. And so, yeah, we were just like, we might as well just go forward with the surgery, and it'll all be over. So we bring the midwife in. We ask her to come in. We tell her, okay, we're just gonna get the C-section, and she's just like, wait, what? Whoa! Like, you just jumped 3 chapters in the book. And I was like, well, I don't want to get Pitocin and then have these painful contractions for so much longer. Like, I'm just ready to kind of be out of pain. And she said, well, if your concern is the pain, then we can give you an epidural with the Pitocin. And we're like, oh. We were kind of like, oh, okay, well, let's put a pause on the surgery idea. If we can just stop the pain and give me rest for a little while, or, you know, whatever it would be, then that's more favorable, because that will still give me a chance of having a vaginal birth. And We don't necessarily have to jump to surgery. So that's kind of what we were thinking when we made the decision of where we were in that moment. You know, ideal, we wanted it natural, drug free, but after literally 25 hours, 27 or something like that hours, it was just like, it was like 4 a.m. at this point. A whole day had passed, nothing changed naturally, and I just knew if I wanted the strength to still be able to have a vaginal birth, that we had to go down the path of getting drug assistance, or if that's even the word for it. So 5 a.m. comes, you know, they give me the epidural and I knock out. I don't even remember what happened shortly after that. I just remember laying back down, and the next time I opened my eyes, it was like after 9:30. Hello folks, 9:38 a.m. We are in the hospital. We've been here over 12 hours. Yeah. I'm trying to talk through the pressure. It's looking like today will be baby Taylor's birthday. I went into labor yesterday morning. 12 something in the morning. And so now it's been clearly more than 24 hours. And things haven't gone as expected and hoped for, but God is still sovereign. And we're praying that very soon, in a couple hours, we'll meet our healthy baby and see if it's boy or girl. Yeah. Just wanted to vlog while we wait. I'm 9 centimeters dilated now. They just need my cervix to thin out a bit more. And then it's time for baby to come.
How are you feeling energy-wise?
I feel good. I feel alert. And I have energy now. I think last night, like 5 a.m., I was done. I had to laugh when our midwife was like, I think the hours for sleeping are over now. I'm like, you can say that. I haven't slept in more than 24 hours. Right. If you think about it, I technically didn't sleep Monday night. So when I wake up, my midwife checks me again, and this time I'm basically almost at 10 centimeters dilated. So God is good, because my body progressed, I dilated, making it again possible for me to have this vaginal birth. So she says, well, we're going to give it a little bit more time, and then we're going to start pushing. So this is like 10 a.m. Now we face a new challenge. I start pushing, but obviously it's hard because I have an epidural, so I can't really move myself, and I can't feel anything, you know, below my waist. Or you can feel, it just feels like jello. So, you know, we're trying for me to push for a while. No real progress is being made. You know, I was told that first time moms, it can take them a long time to push. So I'm trying not to focus too much on that, and really, as much as possible, focus on what I need to do, because we're almost there, right? We made it over the hard part. Let's just get the baby out. After about an hour and a half of pushing, my midwife is like, okay, let's take a break. During that moment, she decides to check me again, and she realizes that baby's head is a little bit off to the side in my pelvis, like it's not fully engaged, if that's the right word. It's not fully engaged in my pelvis, it's a little to the side, which is a problem because I'm trying to push, but if the baby's here and not here, it's not going to go through the birth canal. So she's just like, this is not good, and we may have to have a C-section if the baby won't, you know, come out this way. And now we start this, you know, kind of new issue. So the issue now is baby is not in the place it needs to be for birth. She says, let's take a moment to rest, you know, from pushing. And during that time, I tell Brandon, look, go on spinningbabies.com and look up what can I do with an epidural to help baby engage in my pelvis. I was familiar with this website because, you know, our baby was a flipper. At 36 weeks, I think baby was head up, then baby was head down. And literally, when baby was head up, you know, his head was up right under here. I would feel it under my rib cage. And so when I was able to get him to flip down, he literally flipped down, straight down into my pelvis or into, like, you know, my pelvic bone, and that's why he was in that position. So he flipped down, but it just wasn't in the down position that we needed, which would explain why my contractions just weren't getting effective and consistent, because he was not where he needed to be. And I'm saying he, but we didn't know what the gender of the baby was. So so I tell Brandon, look up what I can do. And, you know, we tell my midwife, hey, this is something we want to try. And so we try it out. But I think something happened with, like, baby's heart rate or something while we were doing it. Something didn't look good, and they were like, no, put her back. Baby doesn't like this. Baby's not comfortable. Put her back. So they put me back from, you know, what we were trying. And we lay down. We take a quick break again. And then all I know is that we tried to start pushing again, and baby's head is coming down. So God answered our prayer, and he allowed whatever my husband found for us to do to help us once again avoid, you know, having to go through the surgery route. And now I'm able to still have a vaginal birth. So I want to say it was about noon or a little after noon when we tried to start pushing again, and my midwife could start seeing the baby's head coming down. So from noon to 4:20 p.m. I pushed. Yes, 4 hours of pushing it took before our son was born. So it was one of the hardest things that I have ever done. And I've done and I've been through a lot of crazy, like, clumsy accidents and stuff like that. But trying to push this baby out with no feeling in my lower body was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And it took me a while. And it was definitely mental. You know, I had to, like, I remember the moment before he was born, the headspace I was in was just really focusing in, because it was challenging. And if I had paid attention to anyone in the room, kind of just like body language of, you know, maybe the nurse is just like, all right, this is taking long, or anything like that, it was discouraging. So I had to focus in, and supernatural strength from God, I pushed that baby out. And Stephen was born 4:20 p.m. after 40 hours of labor. He was born, the biggest scream, healthy, you know, even though my water broke and there is meconium, he was so healthy. They checked him, everything was fine. A couple of things we learned. Number one was that his umbilical cord was short, so every time I was, like, pushing, there was kind of a little bit of a spring back effect because his cord was so short. So there were just so many things that happened in the birth that obviously you don't know in the moment, but they help you understand why things were going a certain way. So he wasn't fully in position. That's why my contractions weren't getting consistent. And then his umbilical cord was short. That's why it took me extra long to push him out. And so, you know, we learned all these things, but more than anything, we were just so thankful to have a healthy baby. You know, it was a surprise gender, so seeing it was a boy, it was just a beautiful moment to go through that experience and have our son be born. And still, even through the zigzags and the, you know, unexpected interventions that took place, we were still able to have a vaginal birth, which is something that I really wanted. So I'm so thankful for that. Recovery was very difficult. Yeah, very difficult. I don't even know what other way to put it. Because of how long I was pushing, I did lose a little bit of nerve control in my leg, in my right leg, so I couldn't really walk on my leg. At first I thought the epidural messed me up, but you know, they had me checked out by the anesthesiologist, I think it was, and the neurologist, and they both, you know, confirmed that nothing went wrong. It's just that my nerves were asleep from how they were in that position for so long. So I couldn't walk on one leg, along with all the other things that are recovering in your body, with, you know, your organs moving back in place, and, you know, just all that stuff I'm not gonna be too, graphic. But recovery was challenging. And then, I decided to breastfeed, so getting adjusted to breastfeeding and just so many things going on. With that, I did have an encounter with postpartum depression that I honestly didn't expect to happen to me. When you are in the hospital after you give birth, especially like within those first couple of weeks, they check in on you. They do these questionnaires with you, like, just to make sure you're not struggling with certain things that can indicate that you're having depression. And, I went through all of that and I was fine. However, I would say 2 months in, I started to just really notice my emotions were out of whack. Like, I would cry at the smallest thing. I was just so emotional with anything. If I felt like overwhelmed or stressed or just overthinking, I would cry and I would just feel so depressed. And it got to a point where I had to realize, like, I think what I'm struggling with here is depression. And I think it's more common than we think, but it's also sometimes a stigma that we're not, as women, willing to admit, because you have this child and you want to make it seem like you have everything under control. You may say, like, yeah, it's an adjustment, it's hard, but you don't want to make it seem like you're feeling mentally like you're going off a cliff. You really want to show yourself to be strong and that you can handle this. And so I think in the beginning I was really in denial, especially since it didn't happen immediately after I had Stephen. I was in denial that, I was struggling mentally. I think also being sleep deprived, obviously, because baby wasn't sleeping through the night. I was up every maybe 2 to 3 hours, sometimes every hour. And being sleep deprived and trying to care for a newborn and recover physically and just all of those factors, it took its toll on me. And I did have to acknowledge that I went through a bout with depression. And what helped me was, number one, sharing it with my husband and just being completely transparent that I think I'm depressed. I realized what I needed most was more prayer and more time in God's Word. Like, my devotional life had pretty much fell off. I wasn't really spending time reading the Word and praying the way that I was before I had the baby. My day had no beginning and end. So I'd be up all night with baby, I'd be up all day with baby, trying to sleep in between that. And so I realized it was going to be important for me to prioritize taking time to pray, taking time to read, to really guard myself for this mental battle that I was going through, because that's really what it was. And with that, a couple weeks later, I started to really feel like myself again, and I was able to overcome the depression that I was facing. And so I thank God for that, and I wanted to share that as a part of my story because it's very much a reality that a lot of people go through. So all in all, that was my birth story of 40 hours, and I did want to share 2 important lessons that I took away from the experience. Especially if you are watching this because you're about to give birth or will give birth in the future. Number one, I learned a big lesson about preparation. So Brandon and I, we did take birthing classes. We took a whole bunch of classes, actually. Like I mentioned, I read books, I looked at stuff online. But I will say that most of my preparation was geared to everything going the way that I imagined, right? So that natural intervention-free birth is pretty much what I prepared myself for. But I had not thought about what would I do if there is an intervention. How prepared am I for that? And that's something that I would definitely recommend, and I realized I should have spent time doing, right? So if I am going to have an epidural, what are those birthing positions that I can potentially still use to help me push? Or if I have an epidural, taking some charcoal after or if I have to have drugs, what are the ways that I want to detox my body after to kind of aid with recovery. That's not something that I thought about, so I wasn't fully prepared for that. And so I definitely encourage you to not just be familiar with the different ways, because we were familiar with epidurals and C-sections and all those things, but not just that, but how would you prepare if this happens to become a part of your a part of your story. Preparation doesn't mean a lack of faith, right? It's just simply acknowledging that this is possible, and so if it were to happen, here's, you know, how I want to be prepared for it. So that was number one. And number two is definitely who is surrounding you during this process. Obviously, you know, things shifted dramatically for me because of the medical issue I faced in my pregnancy. I started out, you know, very low risk, and I still was low risk, but I had this, you know, serious issue that came up that then shifted how they wanted to be prepared for my birth. And because of that, that changed, you know, everything from my provider to, you know, where I was giving birth and all those things. And I would just say that when choosing who's going to be around you, whether it's your midwife, doctor, doula, whatever, it's just really important to get to know them and what they stand for. Because when we started, you know, my labor, I just wasn't expecting Pitocin to be the first suggestion, and it was. And so how do I then handle this, you know, tension or friction that can then be there because we're on two different pages? So I definitely recommend to think thoroughly about, you know, who's around you, who is supporting you through this process. And I definitely send my prayers to you if you are giving birth, that, you know, God will be with you and that your birth will be safe and healthy, and that if you're preparing for birth, that you have learned something from this video, or if you just wanted to hear our story, that you enjoyed it. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.